Hey there, creative souls. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ashley, and today we've got something super exciting and relaxing to do together. We're diving into the calming world of dot mandalas and creating this gorgeous tea light candle holder that is perfect for beginners. Whether you're looking to add a little zen to your space or just trying something new, this step-by-step tutorial will walk you through it all. So grab your supplies, light a candle, and let's get started. And hey, if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss out on more creative fun. Let's make some magic happen. Okay, so we're going to need to find the center of our stone, and because it is not a flat surface and we've got this hole where the tea light candle goes, what I'm going to do is create these 4 points. And I'm just going to use a small ruler to measure from that point that I created to the edge of the stone, like so. It looks to be about 1 millimeter for me. And then I'm just going to double check these as well. And I actually got it on the first try. So they're all 1 millimeter. Now that we know that we found our center, we can go ahead and start tracing our stencil. And I like to go around first. So we're going to do the first circle around. And then continue on to the next going around. You can use charcoal pencil, chalk pencil, watercolor pencil, or soapstone for this. It's just really a matter of preference. I prefer to use the charcoal pencil. Okay, and I'll just pull away the stencil just to make sure I've gotten every single line going around. So I'm going to go ahead and realign the stencil with the lines that I've just drawn on. Then I'm going to go ahead and use my chalk pencil to draw the 16 straight lines from the center out, dividing the holder into 16 even sections. So I'm just going to take a look, double check to make sure the lines are evenly spaced, and it looks pretty good to me. So now I'm going to grab my fabric ruler, measuring tape, and I'm just going to bring each of the 16 lines straight down around the sides of the stone. Okay, so I'm going to grab my stencil again, and we're going to draw one more row going around. I usually eyeball it after the two, but I realized for beginners, it probably would be best to try to get on as many of these guidelines as possible so that we can follow along together. But I've been painting for 4 years, so drawing on one or two lines is plenty for me, and then I just eyeball the rest of the pattern. But for you guys, I will draw on one more just so that we can make sure we can follow along together. All right, now let's start dotting. I'm using a light buttermilk color for this part. It's soft, subtle, and works perfectly with this design. I'm using a 2.5mm dot tool for this, which is great for creating nice, clean dots without too much space in between them. Now I'm going to work in between each section on either side of the line. Start by gently tapping your dot tool into the paint and then carefully place the dots right next to the lines, making sure they're evenly spaced. Remember, don't press too hard. You want the dots to be smooth and even, so just a light touch with the dot tool is all you need. Work your way around, dotting in between each section. Next, we're going to switch things up and add a new layer with this color fawn. I'm using a 3mm dot rod for this band, which is slightly larger than the 2.5mm tool we used earlier. Start by gently pressing the dot rod into the fawn paint and then place your dots just a little outside the first band, making sure they're evenly spaced on either side of each line. I'm going to place the dots just outside the light buttermilk layer, working in between each section again. As you can see, I am skipping every other dot. This just helps me with spacing my dots out evenly between each other. And if I need to, I can adjust the size of the dot as well. As you're dotting, remember to apply a little more pressure with the 3mm rod to create nice consistent dots. You can make sure they're evenly placed by keeping a steady hand and following the lines. At this point, you can start to see the fawn color starting to give the mandala some depth, creating a beautiful contrast with the light buttermilk layer underneath. Now it's time to add the bigger center dots for our petal work. I'm using a rich earthy color called Portobello, and for these I'll be using a 6mm dot rod to create bold, beautiful dots. So instead of dotting every section line, we're going to skip every other segment line for a more open, flowing look. So I'm placing the big Portobello dots in alternating section lines, creating a nice rhythm around the mandala. With a firm press of the 6mm rod, I'm going to place each dot on the center line of the petal work. The size of the rod creates a nice bold dot that will really pop in the middle of each section. Next, we're going to add some micro dots to really fill in the space and make the design look more closed and fuller. I'm using a 1.5mm dot tool and the same Portobello color. Now with the 1.5mm tool, I'm going to place tiny delicate dots in between the fawn band. These dots are much smaller and will fit right in between the larger fawn dots, filling up the gaps and creating a more closed look. By adding these smaller dots, you'll start to notice the design becoming more compact, giving it a fuller, more balanced appearance. Now we're starting with the first layer of our petal work with a beautiful green called Laurel. The size tool that you're going to need is that 2.5mm dotting tool. We're going to add the largest dot at the top of each petal, which will give the design its first layer of depth. So at this point, I realize it's getting a little bit harder for me to hold the stone and paint so that you guys can see in camera. But this would also help you guys too, so you're not holding the stone as often. This is just a little sponge that I've got I use for painting, and I'm just gonna gently place my stone up against it so that we're able to paint. Starting at the top of each petal, place your biggest dot at the very top center where the sections meet. This is the anchor point for your petal, so it needs to be a larger dot tool like this 2.5mm to create that focal point. Press firmly with the dot tool to make sure the dot is nice and big, giving each top of the petal definition. Make sure you're placing the dots at the top of the petal right where the segments connect. Now that we've got our first layer with the big Laurel dots, let's move on to the next step. We're going to walk the dots around the Portobello color, starting from the large Laurel dot. Using a 1.5mm dotting tool, I'm going to place smaller Laurel dots around the Portobello. This technique is called walking the dots. We'll gently build the dots around the center, one by one, to create a soft flowing effect. Start at the outer edge of the Laurel dot, and you're going to place your first Laurel dot right next to it using the 1.5mm tool, creating a nice gradual ring around the larger Portobello. Then keep adding more dots one by one around the circle until they're evenly spaced. As you walk the dots around, you'll see how the laurel creates a nice natural flow from the larger laurel dot at the top, building a sense of depth and dimension. Now that we've built the first layer of our petal, it's time to start the next layer with a warm, rich color, burnt orange. We're going to add this on top of the largest laurel dot to give the petal some extra depth. Using a 2.5 millimeter dot tool, I'm going to place a burnt orange dot right on top of the center laurel dot. This will be the beginning of the second layer. Now that we've added the burnt orange dot at the center, we're going to continue building the petal. We're going to place a couple of 2.5 millimeter dots on either side of the burnt orange dot, which will add balance and structure to the design. Using the same 2.5 millimeter dot tool, I'm going to place a dot on the left side and the right side of the burnt orange dot, making sure the spacing is even and aligned. Then I'm going to use the 1.5 millimeter dot tool, and we're going to carefully walk the dots around the laurel. So again, carefully place each 2.5 millimeter dot on either side of the burnt orange dot, keeping them the same size and distance apart. This will start to form the outer edges of the petal. And then switching your tool to the 1.5 millimeter dot tool and carefully and slowly walking the dots around. If you're enjoying the process so far, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fun dot mandala tutorials. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on any future creative projects. Now let's keep going and build on this beautiful petal. By adding these dots on each side, we're building a symmetrical balanced petal shape that leads into the next layers. Using the 2.5 millimeter dotting tool, we're going to use dark chocolate, and I'm going to place the dark chocolate dots just at the very top of the burnt orange biggest dot. This will be the third and final layer of our petal work. Now we're going to walk the dark chocolate dots down and around the petal using a 2 millimeter dotting tool. You want to start by placing your first dark chocolate dot just below the larger burnt orange dot. Walk the dots carefully down and around the petal, making sure they're spaced evenly. And again, before you grab more paint, make sure you are wiping off your dotting tool in between each time. Now that I have my final layer of our petals done, I'm going to take a quick look over and see if I need to clean anything up, and it looks like I do. So that's when the baby wipe comes in handy, and I'm just going to clean up the stone really quick. Now that I've got the stone all cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and bring you guys a little bit closer so that we can work on the next step. Using the color light buttermilk, I'm going to use the dotting rod in the size 4 millimeter, and I'm just checking my placement. And we are going to dot right over the segment line, and I'm looking for the base of the dot to be at the base of the dark chocolate. And then I'm going to switch to my 2.5 millimeter dotting tool, and we are going to walk the dots straight down, or I should say straight up from the bigger dot. until we get nice and small. So again, we're going to use that 4mm dotting rod in the light buttermilk, and we are going to place a dot right over that segment line, and I want the top of the dot to be even with the top of the dark chocolate, the largest dark chocolate dots. Switching to the 2.5mm dotting tool, and we're going to walk the dots straight up along that line. So as we're coming to the end of the painting this portion of our pattern, this is probably a really good time to let your stone dry so that you're able to handle it better. Personally, this is a good stopping point for myself where I'll let it dry for about an hour or two, and then I'll come back to work on it so that I am able to hold the stone. Ugh, I realized I had not been recording the first half of this part of the pattern, but it's okay. So we're going to use a 5mm dotting rod in the color fawn, and to the left and right of that center dot over light buttermilk, we are going to place 2 dots. So to the right in light fawn, place a dot, and I'm going to wipe my tool off, grab more paint, and then to the left of that segment line, we're going to dot in the color fawn. And then I'm going to grab my 2.5mm dotting tool, grab some more fawn, and we are going to walk the dots around light buttermilk and then down. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. Just make sure you wipe your dotting tool off before you grab more paint. Okay, so now we're going to use our 4mm dotting tool again in the color Portobello, and we're going to place our dot right on top of the fawn, right over that segment line. So for this next step, we're going to use the size 6mm dotting rod, and we're going to place it on either side of the fawn, right above the second dot of dark chocolate. And then we're going to use a 1.5mm dotting tool, and we're going to walk the dots all the way down in between. So I decided to lay my stone down because it was getting a little bit harder to walk the dots. So I'm going to lay my stone back down, and we're going to use that 1mm dotting tool, and we're going to walk our dots down and around the dark chocolate and in between the fawn. So I had a really big editing mess up. I ran out of storage on my phone and did not realize it. But I did not record anything between after this pattern to this part here. So as you can see, I've got a big Laurel dot on top of the dark chocolate petal. So I use an 8mm dot for the Laurel, and then on either side of that big Laurel dot is burnt orange, and I use a 6mm tool for that. Okay, so now we're going to use the 2mm dotting tool, and we're going to grab some dark chocolate, and we're going to dot right in between the Portobello and burnt orange on either side. So with a 2.5mm, we're going to take the dark chocolate and we're going to dot right in between the burnt orange and Portobello. Now we're going to use the 1.5 millimeter dotting tool, and I'm going to dot on either side of the burnt orange and then right in between on top of Laurel. So again, on either side of the burnt orange and then right on top of the Laurel. Okay, so now that we are done with that part of this pattern, I'm going to go ahead and set my stone down because now we're going to work on some micro dotting in that first band here around. We're going to do some micro dotting in the color light buttermilk. And you're going to need your smallest dotting tool. Mine is a 0.8 millimeter. And what we're going to do is micro dot just on the inside at the lip of where the tea light candle holder goes. Make sure you're wiping off your dotting tool each time you grab paint. Sometimes I have a little too much, so what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and dot to the next spot. But just make sure you're wiping off your dotting tool so that you keep the same size and you're not getting too big. Now we're going to grab the color fawn and we're going to continue on with microdotting using that 0.8 millimeter dotting tool. And we are just going to dot right underneath at the bottom of fawn. So we're going to go in at the bottom of fawn and we're going to dot. Again, if you've enjoyed this tutorial, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, like this tutorial, and even hit the bell for notifications for more free tutorials. Now we're going to grab our 4 millimeter dotting rod and the color Laurel, and we're going to go right over the top of Portobelo with our dots. I just feel like when you do your layered dots, it gives it so much more dimension and texture. Okay, so we're going to do some more layering here in that first band. Probably should have done this before I did the Laurel dots. I would recommend to work from the inside out so that you don't put your hands in the wet paint. I'm going to use a 2mm dotting tool, and we're going to grab some fawn. And we're going to load up our tool with fawn and dot right over the light buttermilk. Make sure you're wiping your tool. I usually do every two, so that you can keep the dots evenly sized. Now grab the color Portobello and your 2.5mm dotting tool, and we're going to top dot the fawn dots in Portobello. Okay, so now we're going to top dot the largest dot of buttermilk. You're going to need the color dark chocolate for this one. So once you have your dark chocolate poured, you're going to grab your 3mm dotting rod, and we're going to top dot that light buttermilk. Now with that same 3mm dotting tool, we're going to top dot the fawn largest dots, and we're going to grab light buttermilk, and we're going to go right on top of both of the largest dots of fawn. Now I decided to pick up the stone so that I could show you guys how I dot, but then I quickly realized it was a lot harder to dot holding the stone, so I highly recommend dotting with the stone laying down, because as you see, my dots were a little wonky. So for video purposes, I picked it up, but I would highly recommend just leaving your stone laying down. Now that we're done with those top dots, we are going to grab the color fawn, and we're going to use that same dotting tool in the 3mm dotting rod, and we're just going to top dot right over the Portobello. Okay, so now that we've got our top dots layered on, at this point I think I'm going to let it dry because I can already feel my hands kind of going into the paint right there over the bands. So after I place my top dots of fawn, I'm going to let that dry for a little bit and we'll come back to it. Okay, so I've let the dots dry for about an hour and we're going to go right back into top dotting. So we're gonna use the 6mm dotting tool and then we're gonna grab some burnt orange and we're going to dip our tool into the paint and lightly top dot the laurel. And we're gonna do that all the way around. Now we're gonna grab the color laurel. We're gonna top dot right over the Portobelo in the color laurel, and I'm gonna use a 4mm dotting rod to just gently place my top dots right on top of the Portobello. So again, grabbing laurel and just gently placing our top dot with our 4mm dotting rod. Now we're going to use a 1.5mm dotting tool, and using that same color laurel, we're going to dot on either side of the largest dark chocolate at the top of that petal. So again, 1.5mm dotting tool in the color laurel on either side of the top of the dark chocolate petal. Now with that same size tool, the 1.5mm, we're gonna grab the color burnt orange in the 1.5mm dotting tool, grab some paint, and I'm just kind of like filling space where I think would look good. And I'm gonna go to the right of Laurel and to the left of Laurel, right above that Portobello and right underneath burnt orange. Just bringing some more of that burnt orange down. So again, on either side of Laurel, right above the Portobello, right underneath that burnt orange, we're just filling space. So now we're going to top dot that burnt orange in the color dark chocolate. And I'm using a 6mm dotting tool, and we're going to just lightly place our top dots right on top of burnt orange. So again, 6mm dotting rod in the dark chocolate, and we are top dotting the burnt orange. If you're enjoying this process and want to see more fun and creative dot mandala projects, make sure to hit like on this video and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tutorial. I'd love to have you join the community. Now that we've finished up with our top dots, we're going to let this dry. I usually like to wait 24 hours just to be sure. I know our acrylic paints dry in an hour, but I just want to be 100% sure it is dry before I take a baby wipe to it and wipe off the guidelines. So the chalk pencil and the watercolor or the soapstone should come off very, very easily with a baby wipe, a wet paper towel, or a wet microfiber towel. Once I think that I have removed all of the guidelines, I will make sure to take a very good look over and see I already missed a spot just to make sure before I varnish, all of the guidelines have been removed because I have varnished a piece before and I have missed guidelines and it is not fun to try to clean up. I recommend using a Duraclear satin varnish. I feel like the satin varnish is the perfect balance between a matte and a gloss. Um, you can go as far as adding bliss drops, which is a three-dimensional dot, or if you've got Nuvo crystal drops, it's really up to you and what you have on hand. But for a beginner's tutorial, I figured I would just keep it basic. And again, a Duraclear satin varnish is perfect. I usually also like to add a cork bottom to prevent the stone from sliding. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments and I can definitely create a tutorial on how to add a cork base to your stones. I hope you really enjoyed the Tealight candle holder stone for beginners. I've got more tutorials coming. They're on their way, so make sure you subscribe for those notifications, like this video, and yeah, hit that bell so you get notified. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you later. Happy dotting!